Pacers crushed, I say, in Paris. Their second biggest loss of the season. Tony East here with Locked On Pacers and Forbes to break down the 141-10 drubbing the Indiana Pacers had earlier today against the San Antonio Spurs in France, the first of two of the NBA Paris games of 2025. And holy cow, the Pacers wish they had that one back. Almost just said the Paris. The Pacers probably wish they had that one back. They were dreadful, especially on defense in the second half. The Spurs scored 80 points in the second half of the game. That is unbelievable. 80 points and a half is hard to fathom. 80 points and a half against a below-average offense and the 24th best three-point shooting team in the league is hard to piece together, but that's what the San Antonio Spurs had in this game. Very clearly, you'd like to say this game starts with defense for the Pacers when you see a stat line like that. Pacers have only given up 141 of their time this year. It was in Boston in late December. They gave up 142. That was their largest loss of the season. They lost the Celtics 105-142 that night. That was 37 points. This one, just 30. And the Spurs had never scored 140 this season. In fact, they'd only cracked 130 twice. So in some ways, an outlier-ish game. In other ways, not at all, because the way the Pacers played was just awful. I mean, they looked dreadful on defense. They weren't taking away anything. A complaint I had about the Pacers when they were playing at their absolute worst at times this season, when they lost to Memphis in Memphis, and then they got boat raced by Detroit soon after. You know, that's about when I remember this being a thing. I might have had those games in opposite orders. Yes, that's right. Their 4-game losing streak of Detroit, Memphis, Toronto, Brooklyn, where it felt like the Pacers weren't taking away anything defensively. Not the rim, not the threes. They were allowing too many drives. They were allowing shooters. They weren't connected, as they would say. And they got it back recently, but they weren't good at all in those games. In this one, they weren't connected at all. The Spurs, 18 of 36 from three. That is tied for their fifth most threes made in a game this season. Just the second time that they've hit 50% of their three-point shots in a game this season as well. It ties their season high. So obviously, pretty good when that is how the shooting goes. But thankfully, the Pacers cut off the rim, right? No, they did not do that at all. In fact, the Spurs dominated the rim to 66 points in the paint for the Spurs. Obviously, Wembanyama is going to be good. He's crushed everybody this year, been one of the best 10 or 15 best players in the league, and he was awesome in this game with 30, 11, and 6. But it was the other guys that really embarrassed and pantsed the Pacers in this game. Harrison Barnes goes 7 for 8 on twos and hit both of his threes. Devin Vassell hit 5 of his 6 threes and 4 of his 7 two-pointers. Jeremy Sohan was efficient. Trey Jones made 4 twos. Tiny Trey Jones, he's a good player, but that was, I mean, just a lot of pathetic numbers to look at in a box score. Chris Paul didn't even play that well, and from a scoring perspective, and the Pacers had no chance against this Spurs team because they couldn't stop anything. No, not the three-point line, not the rim, nothing. The Spurs finish with 43 assists in this basketball game. Their previous season best was 38. I think they had 19 of their first 21 baskets were assisted, and you know, at the time, it felt like some of them were from the Pacers sending extra help to defend Wembanyama, which is smart, but the Spurs did a very good job of, once the ball would get out of Wembanyama's hands, moving it to the open player, attacking the rim, and scoring. It was the minutes without Wembanyama that made that number, that assist number, so concerning to me. Wemby plus 18. They won by 30. That means they won that Wembanyama less minutes by 12. They have been a minus 10 net rating team with Wembanyama on the bench this season, but they did very well without him in this game, particularly a mid-third quarter stretch for the Spurs where Vassell and Barnes and Keldon Johnson, Sohan, I think Julian Champagnie was the 5th player in that stretch where the Spurs effectively put the game away. It was actually close at halftime, believe it or not, until that stretch happened. And the Pacers couldn't stop that group that didn't have Wembanyama, and I don't think had Chris Paul either. I believe it was Trey Jones. So just a dreadful, dreadful defensive game for the Pacers, who have been a much better defense the last month and a half, above average certainly in effectiveness with a little shooting luck going their way. Today, the shooting luck did not go their way. The Spurs made half their threes for just the second time this season. They didn't take away the rim. Wembanyama was a game wrecker in ways that only he can do, and they had no chance when all that went against them. Now, the Pacers of old could have, made this a track meet, gotten up to 130 themselves, made this game tight, changed the strategy late. Their offensive process was equally poor. 54 in the paint for the Pacers. That's okay, but not in a game like this where you need it to be better. Fast break points. The Indiana Pacers or the Spurs. If you asked anyone who they thought would have more before this game, every person on the planet would have said the Pacers. That landed at 34-10 in favor of the Spurs, which is fascinating because the Pacers had more points off turnovers, and the Spurs had 19 turnovers while the Pacers only had 11. And so those transition chances for the Spurs came off of missed shots a lot of the time, of which there were many. 42 defensive rebounds for the Spurs in this game off of 3 plus, I can't do math quickly, 56 Pacers misses in total. They were scooping them up and they were running off them. Pacers transition defense also dreadful in this game. So they couldn't get any of their style going defensively or offensively, right? They played too slow. They, I guess, had some points off turnovers. They, I guess, were trying to play the possession game and keep up, but the second chance points was 18-13 in favor of the Spurs. A dominant win in every category for San Antonio against a Pacers team that had been rolling. This is their second worst loss of the season, and of course one did come in late December, but for a team that was riding such a high, this was such a come down for the Pacers, who just got completely embarrassed. I will say this, their last loss, this significant, came in late December to the Celtics, that game I already mentioned. Their very next game was against the Celtics in the same location, and they won. It was one of their best wins of the season, a road win against the Boston Celtics. That does say that this is just one game for the Pacers. They can certainly bounce back from this, but they defend like that, they will not win. They have no chance of winning again, and this was considered a home game for the Pacers on the schedule, so just brutal. They're only their second time they've lost by more than 25 this season. But again, of course, defense is and should be the story. Their offense was not any good either, right? 31 assists is okay, but they only made 44 shots. They only had 9 free throws. Running through it, Ben Mathurin and Pascal Siakam, the two French speakers on this Pacers team, they were both pretty solid. Siakam had 18 and 6 on 7 for 10 shooting. Mathurin, I thought, was the Pacers' most consistent performer in this game. He had 24 points on 11 for 14 shooting. He looked really good. But those two shining usually happens in a game where the Pacers can't quite get their tempo, and they need those two to grind it out or to play a little slower and find those baskets. And they did, to their credit, but that does not make the whole team look good. Miles Turner stunk in this one, 5 for 17, got nothing going against Wembanyama. Andrew Nembhard was 3 for 8. He had some nice passing moments and only turned it over once, but his defense wasn't at the level I thought it's been for most of the season. Neither was Aaron Nesmith, who was 1 for 5 from the field in this game. So Haliburton had some moments. He got 3 threes in the first half, but only 13 and 7. Obi Toppin, same thing. He had 3 threes all in the first quarter on his way to 13 points. Thomas Bryant was energy off the bench. They needed that, but no. 1 for 7 for Ben Shepherd, 2 for 9 for TJ McConnell, 1 for 5 for Aaron Nesmith, 1 for 5 for Jarris Walker. Nothing from the Pacers bench, who needed to beat the Spurs bench for the Pacers to have a chance. Not enough from Haliburton, and in general, not enough consistency from the Pacers on either end, who had to turn to their deep bench late. They got throttled. One of their worst losses on numbers of the season. They get another chance at these guys. It's very hard to beat the same team twice in a row in the NBA, but this is a unique situation in Paris against Wembanyama. The Pacers need to be much better. I'll have much more breaking down this game on Locked On Pacers.